بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. It is difficult for me to really tell you how happy and delighted I am to be here. Sincerely. It is amazing how these youngsters have been enthusiastic, have been preparing for this, have been looking forward to this, preparing not only food, but the room, the cameras, the whole program. It is heartwarming to see so many, I was going to say kids, but many of you are not kids. It is really wonderful, really wonderful. I congratulate the community for having youngsters like you. It is encouraging. I think the future is bright for you. So this is great. Secondly, I want to thank the community for inviting me. This is my first visit to Seattle. This is my first visit to the University of Washington. This is my first meeting with such a large group of youngsters, boys and girls. Yesterday afternoon, I had a very nice informal discussion with the girls. Yesterday evening, I had dinner with a number of adults and a number of youngsters, the boys. It was all very exciting, very interesting. So I am really, really happy. I'm looking forward to the whole day. I am a little already sad that I will be leaving early tomorrow morning. But inshallah there will be some other opportunities and we can stay in touch. And nowadays, you know, with social media and WhatsApp and everything else, we don't have to be in the same room to really benefit from each other. So I look forward to always being in touch with you, inshallah, and following your development, your progression. You're going to be community leaders tomorrow. You're going to be maybe some of you scientists, some of you engineers, some of you doctors, some of you social workers, maybe helping the community in different ways. We don't have to be scientists and engineers to really help the world and help the community. So this is really great. I'm really, really happy. So this whole day, as you saw from the program and from the poster, is about Islam, science, and in the evening, especially with the adults and the parents, a little bit about atheism, this new trend, this new phenomenon that has exploded in the world, including in our Muslim communities in the last 10, 20 years, and we have started to feel the pain from this effect of atheism. So we'll be talking a little bit later in the evening about what's happening, why, what to do about it, and does this relate to science? A lot of people think, oh, it's because science just tells you, oh, you don't need God, God is out. We'll be talking in the afternoon about evolution. Is evolution really telling you there is no God, that you don't have to believe? Everything can be explained naturally. Somebody a moment ago said science is the search for natural laws. That is absolutely true. But the search for natural laws does not mean the non-search for God. Doesn't mean there is no God behind it all. But this morning it's going to be about science, and that's why Mariam was asking, what is your definition of Islam and what is your definition of science? So we want to understand this science and how it relates. You saw in the cover of my little book, which I wrote really for you, for people like you. You heard me in the promo video. I said I wanted to write a short book, small, easy book for high schoolers and maybe freshman college students. And I wanted to give people a clear understanding of what science is, including a simple, clear summary of what we know today in different fields of science. So what do we know in astronomy about the universe? What do we know about physics? What do we know about biology? And what is there that needs to be known? What are the things that we really don't know? Because we have to be careful about claiming too much. Sometimes scientists and non-scientists are too bold and too, they don't have enough humility. This is a word that I really love, this concept of humility. Allahu A'lam. This is an Islamic concept. Allahu A'lam. Always saying, I know some things, but there's so much I don't know. Only God knows everything. So this attitude of humility is an important attitude to keep in mind. Even when we talk about science, especially when you talk about science. Why especially when we talk about science? Because science has made so much progress. In the 20th century, the progress that science has made is tens, if not hundreds of times more than all the progress that humanity had made in its entire history before. In 1 century, we made more progress, 10, 100 times more progress than all the thousands of years before. And so there is this tendency to think that, oh, we have made so much progress, science knows so much. In fact, scientists start to talk about theory of everything. And they say, the theory of everything is near. We're close to figuring out a theory of everything. And that gives them even more arrogance in thinking that then we will be able to know everything, and then there's no need for God, there's no need for religion, there's no need for belief or faith. So these are the issues that we want to talk about a little bit. But the first session, I was asked to talk a little bit about science and the Quran. Science and the Quran. That will be the first session. We'll get to that in a minute. But I wanted to go back to the idea of science. We need to understand what is science before we move forward. In the presentation I will be giving you, and I'll try to keep it somewhat short, not very short, but at least leave 15-20 minutes for Q&A, for discussion. But in that presentation you will see at some point I will be explaining, so what is this science and how should we think about it in how it relates to our religion, to our understanding of the world. A moment ago, Maryam asked, what is Islam? And one of our young brothers said, it is the belief in Allah and the belief in His messenger and the message that He brought. Many of you know that there is this simple hadith, that there was this nomad, Arabi, this person who is not very well lettered or very knowledgeable, and heard that there is this new religion and there is this new prophet in Mecca, and it's not clear what he is preaching. So he went to him and he said, so what is this religion of yours that you have brought? And the prophet told him, قُلْ آمَنْتُ بِاللَّهِ ثُمَّ اسْتَقِمْ. Believe in the one God. This is crucial. This is the first principle. And then live upright. Istaqim, live upright. Live an ethical, moral life. Have a moral compass. And in another hadith, of course, as you know, istafti qalbaka. Look inside yourself to know what is right and what is wrong. And then do the right thing, or follow the right path. So that's what Islam is, in a nutshell. In a nutshell. It is really a fundamental belief that there is a God, one God, and He is there. He is not only a creator, but He is a sustainer. He holds the universe, He holds the world, He communicates with us, we pray to Him, we make dua, we feel Him, we go back to Him, He inspires us. And we feel, I think God is telling me don't do this. I think God is telling me you shouldn't have done that. And we feel a little bit of guilt and something. So there's this spiritual connection that we have. This is fundamental. And then the second thing is to have this ethical life, the moral life. Is to have morals in everything you do. Every time you're looking, it's like you have your compass and it's telling you, don't go here, go here. Yeah, not here, do this, not this, do this. That's your moral compass. That's how you develop from education, from reading the Quran, from interacting with other people who are morally conscious or morally upright. And you develop this conscious and you develop this attitude of istaqim. Be upright, live upright, be ethical, and stand up for what is right. Even if it is about yourself or against yourself. You must always stand up. This is a crucial moral responsibility. This is the reason why we have been created, is to be the representatives of God down here on earth. And so being representative of God here on earth means always standing up for what is right. Always saying, this is right, this is wrong, I'm sorry. Whether I benefit from it or not, whether I made the mistake or somebody else made the mistake, this is what is right. Shuhada'a ala nas. You have to be witnesses. You have to be there always, to stand up, to testify, to proclaim what is right and what is wrong. So this is the first part, very, very important, first part of belief and moral uprightness. Then there is another part which is very important in our existence, why we live, why we are here, why we humans were selected by God to be His representative, to be His ambassadors, to be His deputies, to be His vice-regents. God didn't want to be here and do everything at every second. He said, I have these humans, I will tell them how to do things and what to do, and let them do. Let them do what? I'mar. This is producing, constructing, doing good things, furthering, always building more, always progressing. There is this progression of humanity that is extremely important. That we not only live a moral life, but we continue to make progress. Please remember this. This is extremely important. We continue to make progress. Always better, always higher. How do we continue to make progress? First and foremost, we increase our knowledge. Ilm. We increase our knowledge of everything that benefits humanity, benefits the entire world, and in fact benefits the entire cosmos. This is our role as intelligent, conscious, moral beings. Repeat. Intelligent, conscious, and moral beings. Why do we have this intelligence? Why are we conscious of what we do and we know, I know that I am speaking now, and I know that you are different from me. You have a different mind, you have a different brain, you have a different personality, you have a different life. This is consciousness. And as I said a moment ago, this moral dimension. Moral dimension. Why do we have all this? Because these are tools, these are extremely important tools that will serve us in furthering this progress. Humanity has to always continue making progress. And the first way to enable this ability to make progress is to increase your knowledge. Increase your knowledge of everything that is beneficial. Everything that is beneficial, you should try to know, if you can. You or somebody else. It's fard kifaya, as you know. It is if a large enough group of people have done it, then the others don't need to do it. But if there isn't enough number of people who have done it, then it is incumbent on us to try to do it. Everyone becomes responsible. Until there are enough people that we say, okay, enough. The rest of you do something else. So extremely important to increase this knowledge. And increasing this knowledge can be in different fields, in different avenues. One of them is the activity that we started with, which was reading the Quran. So you can really understand the revelation, so you can benefit from the message, and it helps you, as I said earlier, in developing this moral compass. But there are other avenues, and one of them is science. Science is this method. First and foremost, science is a method of understanding, explaining how the world around us works. The natural world, how it works. And so humans have developed this methodology, this method of how we go learning and how we reach certain conclusions, certain knowledge, certain results, laws of nature, and so forth. That is what science is. Science is really how to go about understanding the world, nature around you. And this then must contain some ways of checking whether what we have found is true or not. Because we are humans. And because we are humans, we are limited in our intellectual abilities. And so because we are limited in our intellectual abilities, we often make mistakes. And that is why the pursuit of knowledge, the pursuit of science has to be collective. Not everyone on his own, do whatever you want, everybody reach different result, it doesn't matter. No, it matters. We have to do it collectively so that we can check on each other. You can tell me when I say something wrong, I can tell you when you have made a mistake, then you say, oh, thank you very much, oh, barakallahu fiqh. I understand now, yes, it's true, that was not correct, I have to go back. So we have to do it collectively, we correct each other collectively. And so science has to find a way to check. How do we check each other? How? Who says? Just because, oh, I don't like what you said, so I'm sorry, that's wrong. Then you say, no, you're wrong. And then, do we vote? We don't vote in science. We have to develop some methods of checking. And then if we find a certain result has been checked in different ways, has been found to be correct, then we accept. That's part of humility. That is humility. If it is completely contrary to what I was saying earlier, well, so be it. That's what it is. So that's what science is. And we have to sort of fit this science, which has been developed over centuries and centuries, but has really accelerated its development in the last century or two. There has been, as you probably know, something called the scientific revolution. In Europe, in the 17th, 18th century, there was this explosion of understanding of science, development of certain science. Now we're beginning to understand more. Now we can develop even some more tools. People started to invent telescope, microscope, engines, machines, all kinds of things, and then we can use them to learn some more. And then it accelerates because now we have more instruments and more tools, and we learn some more, so we can invent some more, and then it goes faster and faster. And so because we have developed all this knowledge, we want to make sure that that knowledge is integrated and is in harmony. You heard me say that word in the promo, in the video. This harmonization. How do we make sure that all of this knowledge and science is really in harmony with our Islamic view of our existence? What are we doing here? Who are we? What kind of knowledge are we developing? And how does it fit with what science is telling us? That's the whole story. That's the whole story. So, shall we start with my presentation? Go ahead and, all right. So, in my communication with Mariam in particular, during the several weeks and months that we have been preparing this, I came to understand that there is this issue of i'jaz. I'jaz, for those of you who don't speak Arabic or don't know very well, means miraculousness, if you like. It's a whole discussion of what i'jaz really means, but to simplify, and in this context, it means miraculous scientific content. Do we believe, as many people have said, that there are certain scientific facts and scientific theories that can be found in the Quran, which was revealed more than 1400 years ago, but preceded by many centuries what science discovered? Which means that this is a miracle. How can this book contain information and facts and theories from that science was only able to discover most of it in the 20th century? A few things according to this theory, i'jaz, a few things maybe during the scientific revolution, but mostly these ideas presumably were discovered by science only in the 20th century, and yet, again, presumably they exist in the Quran. That would make the Quran a miracle. And that would be proof, clear proof, that this Quran is divine, of divine origin. So I was told we need to discuss this because there's a whole controversy and there's a whole debate as to, is this true or are these claims exaggerated and not really correct, so we shouldn't really invest in them and give them so much credit and then maybe later discover that they are wrong, and then it is really counterproductive. So that's the discussion. But I want to explain to you my objective in this first talk, at least, about Islam, science, and I will address this i'jaz in some detail. There will be several slides on this i'jaz idea. But I want the idea, the discussion, to be broader, to be larger. I want to try to explore with you what does the Quran tell us about the way we go about exploring and studying and understanding nature and the universe. Beyond whether there is a specific verse that talks about black holes or whatever, but more generally, so we don't just keep looking like this, we look more broadly, what is the message that we get from the Quran about how we look at science, how we look at the cosmos, how we look at nature, how we look at ourselves. I want the more general lesson, the more general message to be understood. I want to begin with, this is one of the greatest episodes from the life of and the revelation to Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. You will see why I call this one of the greatest episodes of his life. Ubaydah ibn Umayr asked Aisha radiallahu anha, tell us about the most wonderful thing. Please notice, he's asking Aisha, the beloved wife of the Prophet, and as you know, the Prophet was asked, who's the most beloved person to you? And he said, Aisha. And then he was asked, and then who? And he said, Aisha. He said, and then who? Aisha. He had no guilt or no hesitation to repeat several times that the most beloved person to me in the world is Aisha. And he was mentioning it to his companions by name. No worries. He loves his wife and he loves her and he serves people. Anyway, that's not our concern now. So they're asking Aisha, who lived with him many years, and afterwards said, so what was the most wonderful thing you saw from the Messenger of Allah, peace and blessings be upon him? The most wonderful thing you saw, O Aisha. She was silent for a while, and then she said, one night, and I summarize here, I skipped a few sentences. One night he performed ablution, wudu, and stood for prayer. He did not stop weeping, crying, tears flowing down, until his lap was wet, his beard was wet, and then the ground was wet. What happened to the Prophet that he was praying and weeping, weeping, weeping? Shortly afterwards, Bilal, the companion and the mu'adhin, that you know, came to perform the call to prayer. So this is the Fajr prayer. And when he saw him weeping, he said, "O Messenger of Allah, why are you crying when Allah has forgiven you your past and future sins?" How can the Prophet be weeping like this? Bilal was amazed, was stunned. He said, "What are you weeping about? You are the Messenger of Allah. Allah has forgiven you everything. There's nothing for you to weep about." You will see what the Prophet was weeping about. The Prophet said, "Shall I not be a grateful servant? أَفَلَا أَكُونُ عَبْدًا شَكُورًا." A verse has been, he's weeping because an extraordinary verse has been revealed to him. He is weeping because he is grateful for this extraordinary moment in his life. A verse has been revealed to me tonight. Woe to whoever reads it and does not reflect upon him. وَيْلٌ لِمَنْ قَرَأَهَا وَلَمْ يَتَدَبَّرْ مَا فِيهَا. Woe to the person from now until the day of judgment who reads this verse and does not reflect on what this verse really means. What is this verse? Probably some of you know the story and know the verse. Probably some of you don't. Aisha said it was the verse, "Verily in the creation of the heavens and the earth," in Al-Imran, ayah 190 and 191. إِنَّ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَاخْتِلَافِ اللَّيْلِ وَالنَّهَارِ لَآيَاتٍ لِأُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ. Those of you who don't speak Arabic or can't read, the translation is in English underneath. And then it goes on, this verse, this extraordinary verse that the Prophet says, this is, if somebody reads this verse and does not reflect and see the power, and this has made him weep so much, then there is a problem with the person. وَيَتَفَكَّرُونَ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ رَبَّنَا مَا خَلَقْتَ هَذَا بَاطِلًا. Read this verse when we look out at nature, earth, sun and moon, stars, universe, creatures, animals, everything out there, it must shake us. Who would have thought that if the Prophet was asked, what is the most important verse in the Quran? If any of the scholars of today, the scholars of Islam of today, if you grab them somewhere and you say, what is the most important verse that really strikes us hard? How many of you do you think would choose this verse? How many of them? Not many, I'm sure. They would not think this is. And remember, Aisha was asked, what is the most wonderful thing you saw in your life with the Prophet? Now, I'jaz. As I said a moment ago, I'jaz is this claim that we find in the Quran. Certain facts, information, theories that science has only discovered or reached in the last century or two. This has become extraordinarily popular, a claim, so popular, I'm sure you have heard a lot of it. In the Arab Muslim world where I live, it is unbelievable. So what is it? It's the claim that the Quran contains numerous scientific facts and theories that were only discovered by science in modern times. There are numerous books, TV shows, CDs, websites, YouTube videos, you name it. There's an international commission on I'jaz in the Quran and the Sunnah. Oh, because in the meantime, people didn't even stop at the Quran. They started to claim that there are all these scientific facts, even in the Sunnah, in the Hadiths. And this international commission, which is based in Saudi Arabia, organizes conferences, and you can see international everywhere, even in Brazil. Kuwait, Algeria, Brazil, Egypt, Turkey, Tunisia, Qatar, and I could go on with a long list of these international conferences on I'jaz. The latest one was actually only about a month or so ago in Baghdad. There's an award, a big international award that is given every year in Dubai, where I live, for the Islamic Personality of the Year. Two of the personalities in the last 10, 15 years that received the award were personalities, there's no need to mention their names, personalities who are very famous and have been working on this scientific I'jaz in the Quran and the Sunnah. So this is a strong school of thought and a strong phenomenon, movement in the Arab Muslim world. And it makes incredible claims, absolutely incredible claims. In my earlier book, the bigger book, I'll show you the cover a little bit later. It's a big book, it's not really for most of you. Maybe when you get to college and university, you want to read it. It's more than 400 pages. It's not very hard to read, but very long and detailed. I tell the story, when I get to the chapter on I'jaz, I tell the story of this. At the time, this goes back like 15, 20 years, when this friend of mine, an Egyptian fellow, who was actually a young astronomer, came to me and he said, I have a paper, I have a science paper that I read yesterday that is absolutely extraordinary. And I thought he was going to tell me about some science paper. And I said, what is it about? And he said, there's this professor, this Egyptian professor in Egypt. Now he's been dead, but at the time he was still alive. He said, who has written a paper showing that you can calculate the speed of light to an extraordinary accuracy with like 7 or 8 precise digits from one verse in the Quran. I said, what? How can you do that? He said, I assure you, he did it, and I'll bring you the paper. Unfortunately, he didn't bring me the paper, and so it sort of disappeared from my mind. I only remembered it several years later, when I don't know, I don't remember exactly, by searching in the internet, or somebody sent me something, and I found it on the internet, and I started reading. And I thought, oh my God, and it really looks impressive and convincing. Until you go through the details, step by step. You really have to be a physicist and an astronomer to follow, and then to see where it's wrong. But if you don't do that, if you don't dissect it, and I have shown, in my book, I have an appendix on several pages explaining where exactly it's wrong. But if you don't really see where it's wrong, and it's extremely hard for most people to see where it's wrong, then you conclude that, oh my God, I can from one verse do certain steps. Take this word from here and this word from here and multiply here and divide by this and and then voila, speed of light with extraordinary precision. And then there are some other similar things. Several years later, I got another article from somebody else, this time from Tunisia, who takes, again, one verse from the Quran and derives from it the ages of Earth and the universe with extraordinary precision. You know, the age of Earth is 4.567, I don't remember the rest of the digits, billion years. How can you get a verse from the Quran and start multiplying and dividing, and then all of a sudden you get this?
When you say that it was extraordinary precision, you mean the mistake of the edit first, or the mistake
in the derivation? In the derivation. There's no mistake in the Quran, because Quranic verse is very simple. يعرج إليه في يوم كان مقداره 50,000 سنة. Takes this verse. Nothing wrong with the verse. It's perfectly fine. Verse perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with it. And then you start to say, okay, but he's talking about how you measure, and is it the moon or the sun? But the sun takes this much to do this, and the moon takes this much to do this. But then there's an angle between them, and you take this number and multiply by this, and then there's an angle, and you take the cosine and you multiply and you divide. You get my point? So that kind of derivation, and you say, oh, at some point you say, wait a minute, how did you go from here to here? And then you say, oh, but you can't do that, because the moon doesn't do that, or this number is not like that. You've taken the number that suits your needs. Huh? And the same for the ages of Earth and universe derived from the Quran. Same story. It goes on for like 5-6 pages of calculations, and you really have to follow step by step. What's going on? What is he doing? Say, oh, wait a minute. Oh, here. Oh, I see. No, but you can't do that. What? Wait a second. I'm just giving you some examples of how these claims are absolutely incredible. That's why people just, fall for them, because they really look impressive. And then there are numerous claims. You can just Google up and find all these examples of black holes in the Quran, pulsars in the Quran, the subatomic work. Subatomic work means quarks and electrons and positrons and protons and neutrons and mesons and so forth. The genetic code, the grand unified theory, telephone, fax, email, radio, TV, laser, you name it. It's all in there. Somebody has found one of these, and then other people have found some other things like this from specific verses in the Quran. Now you might ask, wait a second, how do you find radio in the Quran? How do you find email in the Quran? How do you find laser in the Quran? I've read the Quran. I'm sure many of you have read the Quran many times. I've read the Quran dozens of times. I've never seen any verse that reminded me of laser. So how do you find laser? How do you find email? How do you find fax in the Quran? Well, here's the idea. The idea is, it depends on how you take certain words and then interpret them in a sort of new way. Now you say, yeah, but you can't just take a word and interpret it any way you like. But here's what they will say. They will say, but if you go back to the original meanings of these words in the old Arabic of the Arabian Peninsula, or how this word was used by the people of Yemen, or by the people of Oman, or the people of the north of the Arabian Peninsula, closer to what today is Jordan and Palestine, etc. Those people used to use this word to imply that if you take a certain ray of light and you make it like that, and say, isn't that the laser? So that's how you get these claims, just so you understand the methodology. In a nutshell, I'm summarizing. If you want to know all the details, including all the references, by the way, you say, where, who said this? Every single one of this is precisely referenced in my book. I give the reference of who said fax is in the Quran and where, according to them, it's in the Quran. Who said that TV is in the Quran and according to what verse and according to what interpretation. All of that is completely referenced. But you're beginning to get an idea that there's a lot of exaggeration here. Another important thing in understanding this issue of i'jaz and scientific information in the Quran and content and so forth is, when did this begin? Is this a new phenomenon, a new sort of fashion, a new theory, or did the Muslim community develop this for a long time? Is this just brand new, a little thing that happened, just exploded in the Arab world, or when did this begin? And this is important because we will come to realize that this idea never existed before. For centuries and centuries of Islamic scholarship, nobody claimed that you could find any such scientific or whatever other content in the Quran. The phenomenon began around 1880 when this scholar called Muhammad al-Iskandarani wrote a book titled The Quranic Luminous Secrets about the celestial means in the sky, and terrestrial means here on earth, bodies. Celestial bodies means sun, moon, stars, planets, asteroids, etc. Terrestrial bodies means everything you can find on earth, including animals, plants, trees, rocks, whatever. The animals, the plants, and the metallic substances. So he has a whole book that is referring to the Quran that contains secrets about all these things. It's the first time in the history of Islam that we see somebody referring to the Quran as containing information about all these things. And you will see why this is an important, although I will say later, negative development. He was followed in 1923 by Tantawi Jauhari with a Quranic encyclopedia. So he produces an encyclopedia containing tables and illustrations on many scientific subjects. So the Quran now becomes an encyclopedia. And from it we can draw tables and drawings and diagrams on all kinds of scientific subjects. So let's talk about the moon, okay, all kinds of information drawn from the Quran and described. Let's talk about the mountains and the rivers, okay, all kinds of information. Let's talk about the animals, here's what we can get from the Quran about the animals. Let's talk about this, and it becomes an encyclopedia, and you know what encyclopedia is. It's like entries. You can do it alphabetically or whatever, and you say, okay, A, ants, let's say. Okay, what do we know about the ants and this. So now the Quran becomes a scientific encyclopedia. Then Maurice Bucaille. Some of you probably know this name, Maurice Bucaille. Many of you probably don't know. This is a French doctor, a French surgeon, who in the 1970s, in 1976 if I remember exactly, wrote a book titled The Bible, the Quran, in light of scientific knowledge. The Bible, the Quran, in light of scientific knowledge. Written originally in French, then translated into dozens of languages, and in it he says the following, important to understand. He says, when I looked at all the verses from the Bible and all the verses from the Quran, according to what we now know from science, I found lots of mistakes in the Bible. I didn't find any mistakes in the Quran. And so everybody, of course, was very happy. Everybody, we Muslims, were very happy. Here's this French surgeon was written a book, and he's saying their own book contains lots of mistakes. Our own book is free of all mistakes. So he became a big celebrity. He was invited everywhere. Was giving talks, etc., etc. That is different from, there's a big difference between the Quran doesn't contain scientific errors and between the Quran contains scientific facts. Yes? Very good question. So, there's this whole discussion and there's a lot of claim that Maurice Bucaille became Muslim. I know somebody who has actually written a whole book and did years of research on Maurice Bucaille, went back and searched his entire life, went to his little town in France, talked to his wife and sister, etc. And he said there's no evidence that he became Muslim. In fact, even his tomb where he is buried contains a Christian reference. There's no Islam whatsoever, even on his tomb. But he became very famous, and his book became one of the big references. You can find it everywhere. Maurice Bucaille. Then there was this Canadian doctor called Keith Moore, whom Sheikh Abdul Majid al-Zindani is a Yemeni sheikh, a political leader and Islamic leader, who actually had a little bit of background in pharmacy, but essentially spent all his life being a religious and political leader. At some point, took some of the verses about the embryo during pregnancy, you know those verses in the Quran, translated them to English, and I think he met this Professor Keith Moore, who was a professor of embryology in Canada. And he showed him the verse and he said, look what verses we have in the Quran that talk about embryology, since you are a professor of embryology. First question to you, anything wrong with this? He said, no, nothing wrong in this statement. Second important question now. Could somebody 1400 years ago have known these things? And Keith Moore says, no. These things, these statements about the embryo and the different stages of the embryo during pregnancy, as stated in the Quran, could not have been known at that time. Yes?
So, what if someone asks you, if the Quran was rewritten, how do we know it's not rewritten? Someone added that information after. But how do we...
Yeah, so we
Can
have...
you use the microphone for the question so we get them in the recording?
Okay.
So could you please just repeat it away?
If someone comes up to you and tells you that how do you know the Quran was not rewritten and this information that we now know was not added, how do you respond to that?
Yeah, so we have a lot of literature about the Quran. There's a whole historical discussion as to how far back do we have original versions of the Quran. You know, the Quran was collected by Uthman. There's the famous Mus'haf Uthman. And there were, I think at the time, 6 to 8. I think there's some disagreement among the scholars how many copies were made when Uthman decided we need to unify this Quran and distribute it because the Islamic world has now become so large and people are reading it and reciting it in different ways, and that's a problem because then we're going to have all kinds of versions of the Quran. So he decided, I need to assemble all of this, make one version, copy it, distribute to different places of the Muslim world. We have not, to my knowledge of reading of history, we have not found any of the original copies. However, what we have for sure is all kinds of tafsir and commentaries that followed that tell us, you know how tafsir goes, like verse 1, and here's what it means. Verse 2, so indirectly you know what the first verse is and the second verse and the third verse, even if you don't have the original copy. Some claim that there are certain copies of the original Mus'haf Uthman in Istanbul, and some people say in Eastern Europe or Central Asia. But the historians say there is no evidence that these are really originals. But it doesn't matter if we don't have the original copies that were written at that time, because we have all the tafsir and we have all the literature that followed later, which does not contain any modifications. So we can trace back all the Quran that was being read and commentated about, tafsir, and then used for fiqh and so on and so forth, and we can find that it is consistent, it is the same. So there is no debate among scholars, historians and scholars of Islam that the Quran we have today is the same as the Quran that all the Muslims have had for centuries and centuries. So there's no way that somebody could have added something. There's no way, because we have so many books that we can trace back that contain exactly the same information, same content. Anyway, the problem with Keith Moore is Keith Moore was a big professor of embryology, but Keith Moore was not a historian of embryology. He didn't know, he couldn't know, and he was wrong in saying this information was not known at the time. Because when people went back later and searched the history of embryology, they found that what the Quran says cannot be said. We cannot say nobody knew that at the time. So you cannot use it as proof. Everybody understands my idea? You can only make the claim if you can prove that that information did not exist at the time. Then you say that information didn't exist at the time, but it is in the Quran. Therefore, it's miraculous. It must have come from God because nobody could have known that. And then there were many others who followed with this. I'm just giving you sort of a very brief history of Ijaz. Yes? It was not. So there is no historical record and evidence. And as I said earlier, humility is to admit that we were wrong. So if we were wrong on this, then we have to admit that we were wrong. And we have to say, yeah, there is evidence now. There are books that tell us the history of embryology from the Greeks all the way to the Middle Ages and then modern medicine, that tell us what people knew at that time about how the embryo looked at first stage, second stage, third stage.
So they could have wrote a book and only one of like 100 facts in that book were true.
What do you mean?
Because the Greeks would write books about embryology.
Right.
And not all of the facts stated in that book would be true.
Yeah, but we're not comparing all the facts. We're just comparing this development of the embryo at different stages as stated in... There's only one or two verses in the Quran that talk about this. So we're only talking about one little fact. How does the embryo develop? So, essentially, it developed from sperm with an ovum to mudra, which is a little clot, a little piece of blood and meat, if you like, and then it develops, and then you get the development of bones, and on the bones you get the development of the flesh. So that's the evolution of the stages. So, did people know at that time that this is the sequence how it goes? Because people say, but they didn't have x-rays, they didn't have sonar, how would they know what happens at 1 month, 2 months, 3 months of pregnancy? You understand? However, people pointed out, and this is now written in the books of history of medicine, that these were noted and observed when there was miscarriage. So every time there was a miscarriage, people would look and say, oh, how long have you been pregnant? To the woman who miscarried, say, well, 3 months. Oh, so that's how it looks at 3 months. You understand? So we can't, I'm saying, just out of objectivity, let me just move forward a little bit, then I'll get back to these questions. Otherwise, we will never finish this. But I promise to leave enough time so we can discuss things. So, I'll skip this. I've already talked about some of these. But to show you how this i'jaz can be, how wrong it can be. So, for example, one of the leaders of this movement of scientific i'jaz ilmi, Zaghlul al-Najjar, and others insist that Earth was created before the heavens. Now you ask any astronomer in the world, Muslim or non-Muslim, Christian, Hindu, atheist, whoever, ask any astronomer and say, was the Earth created before the heavens, meaning the rest of the cosmos? And they say, are you crazy? Of course not. The Earth is only 4.5 billion years old. Our galaxy is 10 to 12 billion years old. And the universe is 13.8 billion years old. There's no way the Earth appeared before or was created first. Nobody in his right mind, not even a student, first-year student at any university from Peru to Japan will say, yeah, the Earth first, and then the rest after. And yet, Because they go and read these verses and they say, well, to me this verse means, they don't go and check what the science says and what is the evidence for it. They draw from the verses of the Quran as they understand them. And that's where it can become dangerous. So I'll quote for you what An-Nagar wrote. The Nagar says, verse 229 decrees that Allah had created for us all that is on earth before fashioning the initial smoky heaven into 7 heavens. Verses 41, 9 to 12 state that all the elements necessary for life on earth, in fact, the primordial earth itself had already been created before the separation of the initial smoky heaven into 7 heavens. As I said, not a single astronomer or student of astronomy in the entire world would agree to this. And so then it goes even further, it becomes even more dangerous. So, I don't mean to criticize some fellow Muslims. I'm only mentioning these names because they are very famous and this is all published. All published. So he says, he's pushing Muslim astronomers to even go in that direction even more. So he's saying, not just people who do i'jaz or the commentators of the Quran, Mufassirin, he's saying, the Muslim astronomers, essentially people like me, astrophysicists, that's really me, and geologists, starting from these Quranic verses, please remember this, I'll come back to this in the conclusion, this is very important. He's saying, starting from these Quranic verses, revise the current theories and scientific calculations. So, according to him, we should start from these verses, whichever way he understands them or I understand them, and then go about revising the scientific theories that exist in the world to establish these facts as i'jaz. This would strengthen the believers in their faith. So he's saying, here's why this is good, according to him, because it really makes you stronger in your faith. And that's problematic. If this is what you need to strengthen your faith, then there's a problem. And invite the non-Muslims in these times when people have been seduced by science and its data to the point of going astray. So he's saying, you can use this as a tool with the non-Muslims, because the non-Muslims really love science. So if you can show them that the Quran not only contains information, but it is so powerful, it can change the scientific information that is known today and taught in different schools and universities, then the non-Muslims will be impressed. Let's continue now. More examples. I think I'll skip some of these examples. If you want more examples later, just tell me. I want to mention that is not everybody in the Muslim tradition agrees with this. Far from that. There are some major voices, major scholars, including Sheikh Muhammad Abdu. I'll talk about Muhammad Abdu in a minute. Sheikh Rashid Rida, Sheikh Mahmoud Shantout, who was I think Mufti or Grand Mufti or Minister of Religious Affairs in Egypt. Dr. Saud bin Faisal Arifi is in Saudi Arabia, is a professor of Islamic studies in Saudi Arabia, wrote a paper against this. Muhammad Abdu is one of the leaders of the Islamic reform movement. This is one of the really great scholars of Islam who appeared in the second half of the 19th century, about 150 years ago, and spent decades, many years, trying to reform, trying to re-explain to Muslims how to go about understanding Islam and how to really restart the civilization. Because at that time we had reached the decline, perhaps the lowest point in our decline as an Islamic civilization. Anyway, Sheikh Muhammad Abdu was Grand Mufti of Egypt for a number of years. This is a great scholar, very important scholar, very well known. Started a whole tafsir that he was not able to finish. He died before finishing it. He died at the age of 56 only, unfortunately. Anyway, here's what Muhammad Abdu says about this kind of ideas. He says, if it were upon the Prophet to explain the natural and astronomical sciences, he says, do you think really the Prophet would have said certain hadiths? I skipped some of the slides that people claim in the hadiths you find scientific information. So it is as if Muhammad Abdu is already replying to people a century before. If it were upon the Prophet to explain the natural and astronomical sciences, that would be the end of the activity of human senses and intellect. Why would I go and study all this astrophysics if I can just go and read some hadiths? and that would spoil human freedom. Then he goes even further. And he says, the Prophet advised people succinctly, very briefly. The Prophet didn't have to give long speeches. Advised people succinctly to use their senses and intellect. So the Prophet is telling us how we go and learn things. Use your senses, meaning observation, your eyes, your ears, your intellect, your thinking, your brain, your mind, your intelligence, on whatever improves their welfare, broadens their knowledge, and in the end, advances their souls. For all these things, he said, you need to use your senses and your intellect. Therefore, the doors for these sciences are intellect and experimentation, not tradition and religious sciences. If you want to learn astronomy, physics, chemistry, black holes, whatever, this is how you go about it. Intellect and experimentation, not tradition and religious sciences. This is somebody who wrote this 150 years ago, almost. Why did he say that? Because he was just reading very clear verses from the Quran that tell us exactly how to do this. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم قل سيروا في الأرض فانظروا كيف بدأ الخلق ثم الله ينشئ النشأة الآخرة إن الله على كل شيء قدير قل سيروا في الأرض فانظروا. Use your senses. فانظروا كيف بدأ الخلق. Go in the world, explore, study, observe, in order to figure out how creation developed on earth. How it developed. How the animals formed and evolved, how trees and plants and even us humans, you will find all kinds of information. He's telling you, Allah is telling you, this is how you go about. He didn't say, read in the verses, you will find some scientific information. At no point in the Quran do you find such a directive, such a command to read in the verses in order to learn about the world. Even in the previous verse that I started with, that the Prophet was so struck with, he was weeping and weeping. إن في خلق السماوات والأرض واختلاف الليل والنهار لآيات لأولي الألباب الذين يذكرون ويتفكرون في خلق السماوات والأرض ويتفكرون. Use your intellect. Here, use your senses. In the other one, use your intellect. And this is what Sheikh Muhammad Abdu is saying. He's saying if you want to learn things, if you want to understand how things are happening out there, this is what you need to do. There are signs of the cosmos nature in the Quran. So just so we don't get the wrong understanding. Because some of you might be thinking, wait a minute, but in the Quran there are hundreds of verses. Hundreds of verses. Professor Muhammad Abdul Salam was the first Muslim to receive Nobel Prize in the sciences, in physics, and then some others received some other Nobel Prizes, but he is the first one to receive Nobel Prize in the sciences, said, when I read the Quran, I found that there is roughly 1/6 of it that talks about or cosmic phenomena. You know how many verses there are in the Quran, right? Roughly about 6,500. So essentially he's saying there's more than 1,000 verses in the Quran that talk about natural phenomena, the mountains and the rivers and the seas and the waters and the air and the winds and the planets and the moon and the sun and the stars and this and that. More than 1,000. So you're telling us that the Quran, so I'm saying, Muhammad Salam is saying, there's more than 1,000 verses in the Quran that talk about natural phenomena. But you're telling us that if we want to really understand natural phenomena, study natural phenomena, we need to go out there and use intellect and experimentation. The answer is yes. So why are there so many verses about nature and the cosmos in the Quran if, in the end, that's not how we learn the science of these phenomena? We need to go out there and do the science. These signs are not science. So this is important. They are a call to reflect. وَيَتَفَكَّرُونَ. يتفكرون. They are a call to reflect. Meaning, please understand this message. This idea is important to me. Allah is telling you that everything you observe out there, there are so many phenomena. Some of them are just absolutely extraordinary. Some phenomena can only be observed from here on earth, like eclipses. We don't know of any place in the entire universe that we have discovered so far. Maybe in the future we'll find some place. But out of the billions of planets that exist, and stars, and trillions of galaxies, each one containing hundreds of billions of stars, most of these stars have planets. None of them, as far as we know, can have a total eclipse of the sun, or a total lunar eclipse. And some extraordinary phenomena. I have witnessed a total solar eclipse, and I was like this. But what Allah is telling you in the Quran is, when you see these things, reflect, think what this means. So, He's drawing your attention, saying, go observe. قُلْ سِيرُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ فَانْظُرُوا. Look, observe, think, walk in the earth, roam in the earth. But always understand that there is some meaning behind this. Don't just look at the phenomenon, describe the phenomenon for the sake of describing the phenomenon. The phenomenon is not the most important thing. Essentially, he's telling the scientists, listen, when you're doing science, always keep in mind that there is some meaning behind it. There's some truth behind it. This is just like, that famous example of somebody who's sort of pointing at the moon like this. And the person, instead of looking at the moon, is looking at the finger. So Allah is telling us, don't look at the finger. Don't look at the phenomenon as a phenomenon. Look at the phenomenon as to what it means. What it means. A call to reflect. There are different levels. This is another idea that is important. There are different levels of detail and meaning in various verses to suit different intellectual levels and times. The same verse, some of you might read and understand more deeper, in a more complex way than others. Because of your own background, because of your own intellectual capabilities, because of the times that you live in. Tomorrow there's going to be a lot more science, a lot more understanding of the sun, or the stars, or the oceans, or what have you. And then my way of reading those verses today will not compare with the way you read those verses and understand them and say, oh, I get it. And yet, at the same time that you're reading those verses, because you have knowledge, you understand some more, and you see some other things in the verses, some other people next to you who will not have had that knowledge or that study will not be able. They're reading the same verses, but some of them are only scratching the surface, some of them are going deeper, and some of them really see things that are contained in the verses that others don't get. So always keep in mind that there is this possibility that some verses can mean more, not different meaning, more than others. And this idea is also in the Quran. This itself, this principle is in the Quran. قَدْ فَصَّلْنَا الْآيَاتِ لِقَوْمٍ يَعْلَمُونَ. In the English translation, which I took from the translations of the Quran, we have detailed the signs or verses, because ayat can mean both ayat of the Quran and ayat as signs out there. But with both meanings, the verse is saying, Allah has put some more detail in these signs or verses for people who know. So those of you who know, you will see more details in those verses and more details in the signs you see up there. Those of us who really don't know much about these things will read the verse and don't see all those details, that more information. قَدْ فَصَّلْنَا. See again here. This is another famous verse. سَنُرِيهِمْ آيَاتِنَا فِي الْآفَاقِ وَفِي أَنفُسِهِمْ حَتَّى يَتَبَيَّنَ لَهُمْ أَنَّهُ الْحَقُّ. First of all, there's another call to observe. Go observe these signs, these phenomena, where out there, fil afaq, in the horizons, and within you, in your own bodies and in your own minds, out and in. But here's where you have to be even more careful and attentive. Pay attention. حتى, so that يتبين لهم أنه الحق. Meaning, when you see all these signs, there is an objective behind. حتى, so that. So that what? It becomes clear until it becomes quite clear to them that it is the truth. Meaning there is an objective behind it. It's not like, oh, just hey, look at the eclipse, look at the aurora, look at this, oh, fantastic, wonderful, how do you explain it? You go to your physics professor or whoever and says, oh, this is explained like this. In the Quran it's telling you, but remember, there is a objective, there is a meaning behind it. So how to relate science and Islam? I'm beginning to sort of conclude a little bit. Science and faith or religion are complementary. They complement each other. Science discovers, describes, and explains nature. Religion addresses existential issues. Who created me? That's what being Islam for us brings. That science cannot bring. Science cannot tell me who created me or why I'm here. Cannot. This I can get only from Islam or from religion. Other people get it from some other religions. Who created me? Why am I here? My spirit. What does it mean that I have spirit? What's this spirit that I have with which I can communicate with this transcendent being? Life after death. What happens when I die? Can science explain to me what happens when I die? No. It just says your body stops. Yeah, but then what about me? Not my body, me. Everything that I am, my personality, my consciousness, my spirit, everything about what makes me, me, not my body. Science cannot tell you anything about that. So certain things science can tell you, and certain other things religion, for us Islam, can tell you, and they complement each other. The Quran is not a book of science. The Quran is not interested in teaching you phenomena, in teaching you how the planets move. If the Quran was really interested in teaching you how the planets move, then Muslim scholars would have discovered how the planets move a long time ago. And yet, none of the Muslim scholars discovered how the planets move. You had to wait for Johannes Kepler in the early 17th century. So, the planets move. For sure, everybody sees. We have known for thousands of years. The planets move. We had all kinds of tables of the positions of the planets. But that is not in the Quran. Because that's not the point. And yet the Quran talks about planets all the time. And the stars. And the sun. And the moon. The Quran doesn't even tell you that the planets go around the sun. As simple an idea as this. That the planets go around the sun. The Quran doesn't tell you that. Why? Because that's not the objective of the Quran. The Quran is not here to teach you astronomy. It's not here to teach you botany. It's not here to teach you oceanography. The Quran is here to give you an important message about why you are here. What is your role here on earth? What happens to you after you die? Those are existential issues, not scientific information. Why would the Quran tell us, presumably, about the black holes and not even tell us that the planets go around the sun? Think about it. Why is it so important for anybody to know about black holes? When students talk to me, every time I give a lecture by the way about astronomy, I get all kinds of questions about black holes. Everybody's completely fascinated with black holes. And my first sort of half-joking response is, why do you care so much about black holes?
So I just kind of excited to answer this question because this is kind of part of my belief. Each prophet that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would send, Allah would give him kind of a miracle to prove that he is a prophet and he's coming from the Creator. And we can go through all the miracles that Allah has sent with every single prophet. I think that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam his miracle which is gonna last forever, which is the Quran. And there can be different kind of sides or angles for these miracles. One of them, for example, is how it is kind of the language, the miracle in the language. Maybe if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would describe us something like the black holes that many years later we are going to figure out, then we can say there is no contradiction between a book that was revealed thousands of years ago and what we have just discovered. So there is a value of mentioning the black holes in Quran. There is a value of mentioning the science of embryology. So as we are progressing over time, maybe at the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they could understand the miraculous part in the language because they were perfect in Arabic. But as time moves forward, we do not understand the Arabic that much, but we understand science and we see how it is matching with Quran, including the black hole. So at some point in time we say, Subhanallah, we believe in Allah.
Thank you very much, brother. That would be true if there was really a science of embryology in the Quran, and if there was a science of black holes in the Quran. Do you know how the black holes are described in the Quran? According to the Ijaz people, one word. Al-Jawari al-Kunnasi. This Kunnasi, according to them, refers to black holes because it sort of sweeps matter. But there's a lot of stuff out there that sweeps matter. And I'm an astrophysicist. So even this sweeping of matter, Kunnasi, does not necessarily refer to black hole. And even if it refers to black hole, it says nothing about the black hole. What is a black hole? Anybody knows, by the way? Let's do a little bit of science. What's a black hole?
I don't really know much about black holes, but I know that how black holes work is that they have so much mass that they pull out like everything into it, and it even starts to bend reality.
It bends
Time.
Bends time. Yes.
Star, gravity is very high and light can't escape a black hole.
And light cannot escape black holes. Very good. Yes, sister.
So a black hole is basically like a tsunami-ish, but it basically eats everything, like in the universe.
Okay. So, I forgot something. Noor. So Noor gave us a very simple and clear definition of a black hole. He said it's an object that has so strong gravity, such a strong gravity, that it pulls everything in and doesn't let even light come out. That's why it's a hole, because it pulls in everything, and it's black because no light can escape it. And that's the simplest and absolutely correct definition of a black hole. Then we can discuss as to, by the way, it's not because it has so much mass, as the brother said earlier. It's not because it has so much mass. It is on the contrary because it is so small a size. Because the mass that it has been compressed into such a small size that its gravity has become so strong. Now, this definition, which is the fundamental, crucial definition of a black hole, there's none of this in the Quran. Right? All there is, according to the Ijaz people, is that this reference to something that sweeps. And I said earlier, there's a lot of stuff that sweeps. So, I'm saying, look, I would have been happy if there was a clear statement that says there are some objects out there that sweep so much that even light does not come out of it. If there was a verse that said this, I would have said 100%. But it doesn't, so it is an interpretation. You're saying something that sweeps, say, oh yeah, remember, there is, the black holes do sweep. I say, but not just the black holes. There's a lot of stuff that sweeps. Yeah, but this is the black hole. But there's nothing about the black hole per se. What characterizes the black hole is not in the word. But what is in the word represents so many things out there. So if there was something about the black holes, I would have said...
Probably the question, doctor, that probably many of us are coming today to ask you today is, how much should we invest in this kind of what we call the miracles, the scientific miracles in Quran? And here is the point, just to kind of follow up. Maybe we do not understand the verse right now. And now maybe al-jawari al-kunnas, we started to say that may refer to the black holes, and maybe the people who are going to come a couple of 100 years after us, following up along the same line of thoughts, they may find something that is more concrete. What's your
So we
take would
don't,
be
we don't
on this?
build on something that may happen 200 years from now. This is not proper methodology, Islamic or scientific. We don't say maybe somebody 200 years from now will find out, and so let me accept that. I don't accept something that may or may not happen 200 years from now. So we have to be
I kind
careful.
of politely disagree, and then I'm going to let the campaigners
No. If you disagree, we have to tell me why. No, sorry.
Definitely, because many of the scientific facts, they
But this is not
evolve over
scientific. You're
time.
saying the word itself. We're not talking about the scientific. We're saying the word itself. I said the word itself does not contain any information about the black hole.
So
How is it in 200 years from now we will find that the word really contains the characteristics of the black hole?
Good one. So let me kind of do it like an interview, kind of. So do we believe Dr. Gassoum? So according to my understanding, that there are nothing in the Quran, according to your point of view, that Quran mentioned and it was not discovered before. Because when I was raised up, it was kind of the science of embryology that was mentioned in the Quran and it was not discovered before. So are there anything in the Quran that was mentioned
So
and not discovered before?
I'm trying to clear up. And I said earlier,
Yeah.
I said it is our responsibility as Muslims, لِتَكُونُوا شُهَدَاءَ عَلَى النَّاسِ. So we bear witness. We are here to speak the truth. I said from the beginning. I said whether on Quran, on Islam, on politics, whatever, we have to say what is right. Right?
Definitely.
To say what is right, we cannot say the science of embryology in the Quran. There is no such science of embryology. There's one or two verses that say, here's how the stages of an embryo evolve. This is not science of embryology. It's
Point taken.
just so we clear up, so people don't get these big impressions.
So
No.
the second level, Dr. Qassoum, now we fully understand that there is no science in the Quran.
Right.
But are there any kind of mismatch between what we discover in science and what is written in the Quran? Mariamo, you should be kind of...
Me?
So this is the second question, Dr. Qassoum, that as we are evolving in science, is there any mismatch with whatever is written in the Quran, or are they completely loosely coupled? So which means whatever we discovered in embryology over time, is it going along the same way it is described in the Quran?
So I said earlier that one of the main points that Maurice Bucaille brought, and it's important that we understand exactly what Bucaille said, and not transform his message into what it was not. Because what he said was very valuable. What he didn't say and people thought he was saying is actually incorrect. What he said was there are no scientific errors or inconsistencies in the Quran. Very important. This is very important. What he didn't say that people kept repeating is that there are scientific facts in the Quran. He said, I never said that. I heard Maurice Bucaille speak myself in Algeria in French. And he was saying, no, look, I didn't say that this verse means whatever. And he was a medical doctor, by the way. So he would have been the first one to say, oh, this embryology is really what science is saying. But he said, I'm not saying that. I'm saying there is no inconsistency, there is no error, there is no verse that I can point to and say, this is wrong.
So we are on the same page that there are no scientific kind of contradictions.
There are no contradictions whatsoever.
I'm just gonna ask
I just want to make one more point, and it's important. 2 points actually, I'll make them very quick. One is, I want to repeat one of the message points that I try to stress, and that is, the Quran calls you to reflect, pushes you to look at all these phenomena and to reflect. And I started with the story of the Prophet ﷺ. I said, when you read these verses, reflect. وَيْلٌ لِمَنْ قَرَأَهَا وَلَمْ يَتَدَبَّرْ مَا فِيهَا. Yes? Those who read this verse and don't reflect upon it. So you need to do this. When you read some verse, reflect on what it means. When you look at the phenomenon or you understand some new science, reflect on what it means. This is one. Two, I tried to give you a couple of examples of people who followed this i'jaz methodology and went a little too far and started to make all kinds of wrong claims. This can become very counterproductive for us Muslims, because people will be reading that stuff and say, this Islam stuff is just nonsense. What? What are you talking about? The earth was created before the galaxy? What kind of astronomy is this? And you're a professor of geology? We don't want to give that impression that our holy book or our scholars don't know what they're talking about, or they're saying some wrong things. So be very, very careful with this. Don't follow it, because it's a banana peel. It can really make you slip. It can really hurt Islam. We don't want. Islam is rich. Quran is absolutely wonderful. But take the message that the Quran is giving you, pursue science, understand, know what this implies, what kind of meaning this carries. But don't jump into, oh, this verse means and this verse means. Don't do that. So,
One quick question that I want to tell you to
Okay.
Taylor. Quick question, Dr. Qassoum. So do you think that we are going to understand the Quran in a different meaning over time? Like 10 years from now, we are going to understand the word al-jawari al-kunnas in a way. But 100 years, you are going to understand al-jawari al-kunnas in a different way. But in 1,000 years, whenever we have more and more science, are we going to understand the Quran in different ways over time? Yes. What's your take on it?
very good. And that's also the message that I try to convey, that there are different levels of meaning in the Quran. And as we advance, so for example, when you read Ash-Shams, there's Surah Ash-Shams, there's all kinds, I don't know how many verses that mention Ash-Shams in the Quran, right? Do you think that when I read, astronomer, astrophysicist, done even some research, published some things about the sun, when I read the verses that talk about the sun, I have in my mind the same understanding as people who lived 1,000 years ago and were reading the same verse about the sun? Obviously not, right? Does that mean there's a problem because these people didn't understand the sun as I understand the sun from the same verse? It's not a contradiction. It means there are deeper understandings and deeper meaning. And in fact, even tomorrow, in fact today, there are many people who read the verses on Ash-Shams, don't understand even 5% of what I understand about Ash-Shams. Does that make it a problem? No. Because the Quran, and that's really the miracle of the Quran, it can address all people at the same time, with the same words, same verses. You understand more than me, but all good.
Jazakallah khair, Doctor. So I'm sure that many of them, some of them, they're excited for asking questions. Yusuf.
What does Hameen mean?
This is for you, not for me.
I don't know either. One question for you today.
No, I'm only here to answer questions that relate to science. Please.
It doesn't have a meaning. It was, what I know at least, is basically it was a verse from Allah sent down to us to grab the non-believers' attentions. When the Quran was sent down or revealed, there were many poets, Arab poets, and they had amazing poetry. And so then when they heard these weird letters that had a meaning, they were like, what does this mean? We want to know more. And so it would also grab their attention and it would make them want to listen. That's what I heard.
Very good.
What you know so far, you never know the people who come later how they will know.
So are you saying that there aren't any scientific facts or scientific discoveries in the Quran? I mean, there are no contradictions. But are you also saying that there are no discoveries?
I'm saying there is no information in the Quran that is clearly scientific and was only discovered in the 20th century.
So this is actually going off a question that was asked earlier. So in relating to the sort of Greek embryology thing, the Greeks and the people in the past believed a lot of stuff about embryology that wasn't true. So the fact that the Quran specifically only chose to mention the facts, even though they were known before, but it only chose to mention those facts that were actually true, and doesn't that in of itself become kind of a like almost a miraculous thing, that why did it only choose to describe things out of everything that was known, only pick the things that were actually true?
So, it's a very good question. But there are two things here that we need to clear up. One is, it's not what the Greeks believed. It is what the Greeks saw, the medicine that they developed. What they saw, what they drew, what they thought it means, how they treated pregnant women when they were in their third month or sixth month. I don't want you to think, well, the Greeks believed all kinds of stuff. No, it's not what they believe. This is the medicine. Some of it was correct, some of it was incorrect. There's stuff that today we find, oh, we were wrong about this. You know, yesterday on the plane, or the day before, as I was coming, I watched a documentary on vitamins and antioxidants. And it turns out that this antioxidant business is 99% wrong. Even though we've been fed this antioxidant story for years and years now. I don't know how many billions of dollars are spent on antioxidants. Huh? So today, there's some stuff that we think are at some point are correct, and then they're not correct. So I don't want you to think the Greeks were all saying all kinds of things. And number two, more importantly, we said a moment ago, we said the Quran does not contain erroneous statements. This, and I said, this may be the miracle itself. But there's a difference between i'jaz, which says it contains scientific information that was not known at the time, and between saying it does not contain errors. I said, Maurice Bucaille was saying it does not contain errors, and then people were saying, Maurice Bucaille is saying there's i'jaz in the Quran. He's saying, I'm not saying there's i'jaz, I'm saying there are no errors. There's a big difference. Now, the fact that it doesn't contain errors is a significant statement. I agree with you. But that's different from saying there are black holes in the Quran.
Not to argue against anything you've
Oh,
said,
please argue,
but
please. No, don't
Sorry.
apologize. I'm serious. No, really. Don't ask questions like, I'm not going to. You have all the right to argue.
okay. I've heard many stories of scientists who have converted to Islam because, for whatever reason. So, if you are saying that there's no scientific information in the Quran, then why, for what reason did these scientists convert to Islam? Why
Right,
did
I met one person. I was telling Dr. Muhammad Ali yesterday. This Australian person, who's actually, I think he was a biologist or a geologist. Anyway, so we were at a conference on science and religion. And somebody gave a talk about this. It wasn't me. Something similar to this. And then at the end, we were chatting together, and this fellow came. And he said, I am actually a Muslim. And I actually accepted Islam about 10 years ago on the basis of this i'jaz. So now I am shocked to learn that this is actually not correct. So what did I ask him? I said, when you became a Muslim, did you find things that made Islam look like a great religion that you are proud of belonging to? Or was it only the scientific stuff and you're still impressed only with the scientific stuff? And he said, no, I love Islam, all kinds of stuff in Islam. Then I said, well, maybe it was just Allah that brought you in a certain way to Islam, and then you realize, it's like you grow up, you're like a kid, and your parents tell you certain stories, and then you realize you grow up and say, oh, that wasn't quite true, but my parents loved me, so they just wanted me to, be happy or something. So I said, as long as now you accept Islam with the great stuff that's in Islam, you can drop this, can't you? And he said, yeah, but it's still strange that this is what drew me to Islam. And he was sort of a bit upset about it, not angry, but he was like, why would people bring me to Islam with this if this is not correct? And that's why I'm saying, so this fellow accepted Islam, learned a lot of things about Islam, is now proud to be a Muslim, and it doesn't matter to him if there are scientific facts in the Quran or not. Some other people tomorrow might read and say, oh, so you guys lied to me, so you guys were talking nonsense. I don't want any of this. So we don't want to draw people the wrong way, because then they might react negatively. Alhamdulillah, this fellow didn't react negatively, but some others might. So I don't think we shouldn't trick people into Islam. We should invite them with what's really good and great about Islam. Simple. The sister behind.
Alright, so I have Yeah, one question.
Okay.
This question relates to, since like next year I'm gonna take Earth and space science. I'm just curious to I watched this full video of how the scientist converted to Islam, and so it kind of dragged me back to atheism. I have like a quick question. If you know anyone that converted to Islam, just like a quick summary of how.
I'm not sure I understood. So you're asking,
Yeah, if you know any atheist person that converted to Islam.
as I said, there are all these Westerners or people from.
She's asking like a specific person that you know and maybe tell a brief story about how they converted and why.
Converted to Islam.
Yes, because of
Because
science.
there's a difference between people coming to believe. We talk about this in the evening, about atheism and belief. People who were atheists for years and years in their life and then came to accept the existence of God and became a believer. And people who convert to Islam, that's a different proposition. I don't know anyone who went directly from atheist to now I'm Muslim. At least I can't remember. But I know a lot of people who were atheists and then said, no, I believe. And I know a lot of people who were sort of religious or came from a Christian background or something and then converted to Islam.
Okay, so let's cut the discussion here now and move on to the next activity, which will be vote prayer. And after that, we're going to get you guys out on the field. So everyone, please go ahead and make it.
Inshallah, during the game, we're going to be